Welcome to Public Health on Call, a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, where we bring evidence, experience, and perspective to make sense of today's leading health challenges. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes.
This is Lindsay Smith Rogers, producer of Public Health on Call. A few months ago, we heard from one of our regular listeners, Dr. Esan Simon, who told us he worked as a flight surgeon for the U.S. Coast Guard. We had some questions, starting with understanding what flight surgeons actually do, and he had answers in this conversation with Dr. Josh Sharfstein. Let's listen.
Captain Esan Simon, thank you so much for joining me today on Public Health on Call to talk about the role of physicians and public health physicians in the Coast Guard. And I thought I would start by asking you to introduce the Coast Guard to our listeners. I think we all have the image of the Coast Guard rescuing a ship or a fisherman who the mast broke or something, and they send out the Coast Guard. But tell us about what the Coast Guard does.
I've been affiliated with the Coast Guard as a physician since 2004, so almost basically 20 years now. And when you talk about the Coast Guard, the Coast Guard's been around since August 4th, 1790. So it has a rich history of service to the country, service to the people of the United States, as well as around the world. There's 11 statutory missions that the Coast Guard executes on a daily basis. And some of these you alluded to, search and rescue. That's a big one. A lot of people might be familiar with that component of the Coast Guard. But if, for example, as you mentioned, if somebody's on a fishing vessel and they're stranded out to sea, and there are not too many people that can go and rescue a person like that. So they might send a Coast Guard helicopter out. That's one of the missions. Other missions include aids to navigation, ensuring that the fishing lanes and where vessels travel, making sure their navigation points are properly maintained. Inspection of ports and shipping vessels that come from external to the United States. So the maritime economy is a huge component to not only the national defense of the United States, but the health and well-being of so many. So those are a few missions that the Coast Guard has, and there's several others as well, but critical to the economic vitality of this country and the sustaining of people in the United States.
Great. Well, that is really important to appreciate, and that you've been there for 20 years working as a public health service physician. Tell me what that job title is. Like, what are you called within the Coast Guard?
Sure. Yeah. So there are a variety of medical aspects of the Coast Guard and delivery of healthcare in the Coast Guard system. My particular job, I've been a flight surgeon. I was in the Navy before the Coast Guard. I was a flight surgeon with the Navy, deployed with the Navy. And then I did an inter-service transfer to the Public Health Service and came into the Coast Guard. So my specific role has been a flight surgeon.
And you said you are a flight surgeon.
Correct.
And that's because the Coast Guard also has airplanes.
Correct. And not everybody knows that. So Coast Guard not only has airplanes, but they also have helicopters. I've been fortunate enough to be stationed at a few different Coast Guard air stations, such as Elizabeth City, North Carolina, which has a rich history of repairing and maintaining the aviation assets throughout the entire Coast Guard fleet. But there's long-range planes, C-130, there's shorter-range planes, there's long-range helicopters, the 860, shorter-range helicopters, the Dolphin.
And you do surgery in flight?
So the term flight surgeon, I'm glad you mentioned that. So a lot of people listening might not know what a flight surgeon is. So let's, if you don't mind, I could just briefly touch on that.
That would be great.
In World War I, they used to, the history of the term flight surgeon, World War I, they used to call the physicians surgeons. Just sort of, if you're a physician, they called you surgeons. As we developed the military aviation for the country, they recognized that they needed people with specialized skills to take care of military aviators. And because of that vestige of that term surgeon in World War I, when military aviation came around, they started calling these specialized physicians flight surgeons. Now, that does not mean that we go in a plane and do surgery. That's just the history of the term flight surgeon. And really what a flight surgeon is, you can think of it as a primary care physician whose specialty is taking care of military aviators, because military aviation is a unique mental, physical, emotional environment, and you need certain skill sets to be eligible to enter into that environment. And then you have to maintain your fitness for duty throughout your military career. And the flight surgeon is the one who ensures the individuals are medically ready to be accepted into aviation, because it's quite a strain academically, physically, emotionally, and also to maintain their health throughout their aviation career. So that's what a flight surgeon is.
So compared to a land-bound primary care doctor, a flight surgeon might ask like what questions?
Sure.
Like what would be like the kind of question a flight surgeon would ask that a regular primary care doctor wouldn't?
Sure. And not only do you see patients as a primary care doctor, but we also get to fly. So most primary care doctors, their part of their job is not to get into a military aircraft and fly, but we actually do fly. We're not pilots, but that's a huge component of the flights, because your question is, what's different about a flight surgeon than a regular primary care doctor? And the reason that there's a variety of reasons why a flight surgeon flies, but one of them is to integrate with the air crew, to understand the aviation environment. And the aviation environment, whether you're pulling G's, launching off an aircraft carrier in a Navy F-18 Hornet, or at 2 a.m. and it's dark and stormy and there's 35-foot seas and you're in a 860 helicopter and you're trying to, rescue someone in a dire situation. That environment is not like sitting in an office, any of those aviation environments, and deliver the best and optimal care for the military pilots, military air crew. That physician, that flight surgeon needs to understand that environment. So that's why you fly. Additionally, military aviators, it's a very unique club, if you will, and being able to enter into that environment where they trust you to share, intimate things which could affect their ability to fly, you have to have trust with the military aviator. And that physician, one of the ways to develop that trust is to actually go out there, do missions with them, fly with them, so they understand that you understand them and that they trust you and all that. So those are just a couple of differences with military aviation.
So the kinds of questions may not be all that different, but the way that you have to really understand the workplace means that your job is very different.
Excellently well said. Yes, you're correct.
Let me ask you about some of the more exciting moments in your career. I'm sure that there are a lot to choose from, but I wonder if you mentioned Hurricane Katrina.
Yes.
What was the role of the Coast Guard and how were you involved in the Katrina response?
That one definitely stands out in my mind. I've been in the Coast Guard just since 2004. Hurricane Katrina, September 2005, I believe is the correct date. And so they asked for volunteers, physicians, to go down and support the operators. And what I mean by an operator are the military people doing the mission of the Coast Guard, doing the mission of the Navy, Air Force, et cetera. So they asked for medical support for the operators so the operators could go do their job in rescuing people. And you may recall Dr. Sharfstein, the Coast Guard, had a huge role in Hurricane Katrina, particularly the aviation assets of the Coast Guard, but also the small boat assets of the Coast Guard, literally boats going house to house, rescuing people, helicopters, picking people up off of roofs. I mean, huge deal.
Right.
So to support the people doing that job, because they have their medical needs as well, they asked for physician volunteers. So I went down for 2 weeks. I was at the 17th Street levee. I remember that was the one that broke, and it wasn't very far from where we were stationed. Basically, we set up a forward operating base where the operators were staged out of there and then went throughout the day, throughout the night to go do their missions. And that was just a very memorable time for me. It was very challenging, very dynamic, a lot of uncertainty. But, when you find you're in those dynamic, challenging environments, those tend to be very rewarding. It was very arduous. We didn't sleep much. We were.
Why don't we shift gears to another major crisis, the pandemic? How did you experience that in the Coast Guard?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for asking that question. That's a big deal. So the Coast Guard Academy, a lot of people might have heard of the Naval Academy, the Air Force Academy, West Point. Not everybody's heard of the Coast Guard Academy, which is about 1,000 students. It's located in New London, Connecticut. And similar to those other military service academies, the Coast Guard Academy is a military college. And after graduation, you go active duty. So that college needs a medical director. So I was the medical director at the Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut. I arrived there in July of 2019. So this was before the pandemic. I'd never heard of COVID, never heard of. And then, come into 2020, just, 6-7 months after getting there and boom, the pandemic hits us. So my job during the pandemic was to the medical oversight, the medical management of healthcare for the Coast Guard Academy cadets. The cadets are the students, from freshman year through junior year, fourth class to first class is what you call them. So we ran the medical for a college at the Coast Guard Academy. And that's actually how I came across you, Dr. Sharfstein, Public Health on Call. And when I learned that Johns Hopkins had this program, and quite frankly, I was not an infectious disease person. I did my family medicine at Mayo Clinic. So I'm a family medicine guy, not an infectious disease guy. I hadn't, managed the pandemic before in my life. So the Public Health on Call was a huge asset for me during that time. And I literally would listen every day, and we would have meetings with the admirals, the two-star admiral, my boss. I literally would quote and reference, your guests. I remember your medical director from Michigan when she was on there, and all these different experts that, quite frankly, I implemented so many of the things that I heard in your podcast. Talk to my staff about it, talk to my boss about it. So that was my role.
That's good. You lived to tell the story about that.
I did. Yeah. And I was so happy that we had a chance to meet. And I'd like to say thank you a couple months ago when we met. So thank you for that critical role that you played during that time.
Was there anything special about being on a campus that was a military academy?
Absolutely. So, obviously people are going to know about, college campus and all that. A couple things about it. Well, one, the Simon family lived on the campus of the Coast Guard Academy. So that was, and as a matter of fact, that was a huge reason why I accepted that position, because I wanted our three kids to experience living not only on a college campus, but on a military college campus. And some of the unique aspects of living on the actual campus, we would literally, out of our front door was the parade field. So Coast Guard helicopters would land right in front of us, like literally fly over our house, land on the field. The cadets would march right in front of us. When it was graduation, President Biden came to give the graduation speech. We just walked out our front door, walked to, the graduation ceremony, which is right there at the football field, just a little, and we just walked back home after that. And then, of course, you're dealing with roughly about 1,000 young people, young men and women serving their country who live all day, 24/7, right there on the campus. So if you can imagine all the complexities of, okay, how are they going to eat? How are we going to distance them with the pandemic and living in the dorms? How are they going to play football and track and basketball? All those different things that we had to deal with, like so many other universities and colleges around the country had to deal with. So very challenging time, but we survived. We made it.
Captain Simon, I understand that you are retiring from the military soon.
I am. I've got about a month to go until my ceremony, actually. After 26 years, the end is in sight, and it's rapidly approaching. So looking for a job. I'm not sure what I'm going to do as yet, to be honest with you. In the military, you have you get military orders. Every few years, here's your next set of orders. The military comes and moves you. You move on. You learn a new position, and you just kind of roll with it. But I'm not going to be getting any orders this time. It's going to be retirement orders and on the way out the door. And then I have to find the next thing. And I'm not sure what that's going to be as yet. So,
well, you've had such a tremendous set of experiences, and you've made such important contributions to the country. So I'm sure that will serve you well in whatever you decide to do next. And I really want to thank you for introducing us to the world of Coast Guard medicine today.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sharfstein. Such a pleasure.
Public Health on Call is a podcast from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, produced by Joshua Sharfstein, Lindsay Smith-Rogers, Stephanie Desmond, and Grace Fernandez-Ciceri. Audio production by J.B. Arbogast, Holly Cardinale, Spencer Greer, Matthew Martin, and Philip Porter, with support from Chip Hickey. Distribution by Nick Moran. Production management by Catherine Ricardo. Social media run by Grace Fernandez-Ciceri. Analytics by Eliza Rosen. If you have questions or ideas for us, please send us an email to publichealthquestion@jhu.edu. That's publichealthquestion@jhu.edu for future podcast episodes. Thank you for listening.